Inside North Dakota Politics with Nicholas Kwolek, Josh Meny, and political correspondent Maddie Beer-Temple.
Welcome to Inside North Dakota Politics. I'm Nicholas Kwolek.
And I'm Josh Meny. We have a lot to get to today, including a conversation with a lawmaker behind one of the most closely watched bills so far this session regarding the governor's emergency powers.
Plus, our Capitol correspondent Maddie Beer-Temple is standing by to give us a recap of the week that was in the halls of the state legislature.
But before we get to that, the big story in Washington. The new president of the United States, Joe Biden, took the oath of office just before noon on Wednesday. Afterwards, he declared democracy has prevailed. Former presidents Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton were on hand for the transfer of power, as well as the outgoing Vice President Mike Pence. Speaking at the Capitol exactly 2 weeks after rioters stormed the building, the 46th president said unity is the only path forward.
My whole soul is in this, bringing America together, uniting our people, uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause.
Former President Donald Trump declined to greet his successor, but wished the new administration luck and success.
Hours after taking office, President Biden signed a flurry of executive orders. Here are just a few of them. Face masks are now required for any interstate travel by plane, train, and public transportation. The president revoked permits for the construction of an oil pipeline from Canada to Nebraska, and he ordered the stoppage of construction of physical barriers along the U.S.-Mexico border. The U.S. has also re-entered the Paris Agreement, an international treaty addressing climate change. We spoke with Senator John Hoeven about the new administration.
They've talked a lot about unity, but that does mean not just moving their agenda forward the way they've talked about. That means working with Republicans. And so, you know, when they talk about something like the Green New Deal or some of these other things, you know, those are things that would be real concerns for North Dakota. So I hope that in terms of, you know, that outreach or the unity they're talking about, they're looking at coming up with some things that like I say, are common sense and work for our great state of North Dakota.
Meanwhile, some North Dakota lawmakers are looking to preemptively curb the impact his executive orders could have on the state. Let's throw to Maddie Beer-Temple at the state capitol now. Maddie, what's being considered there?
Josh, Nicholas, House Bill 1164 aims to allow North Dakota to exempt itself from certain presidential orders. Under the bill, orders could go unenforced if the Attorney General deems them unconstitutional and if they relate to pandemics, gun rights, the regulation of coal, oil, agriculture, and more. Minot Republican Representative Matthew Ruby is one of the bill's co-sponsors. He says it's not directed toward the new administration, but rather an expansion of executive powers in general.
I would have supported it whether it was Trump or Bush before Obama or Obama, you know, any of them. I really think that there's a huge difference between going through Congress and getting something passed compared to just you didn't get your way, so you're putting it in as an executive order.
The bill had a hearing earlier this week on Wednesday. Lawmakers have not yet voted on it, though. Another big question at the Capitol, should North Dakota's state of emergency end? A House resolution would end the order if passed by both chambers, but several state leaders oppose the measure. That includes mayors of Minot, Fargo, Williston, and Grand Forks, as well as the state's health department and the Adjutant General of the National Guard, among others. Minot Mayor Sean Sitma says the state hasn't turned the corner far enough to end the emergency, and he worries that federal funding will be in jeopardy without the declaration.
We're exhausted, but I can tell you we're not nearly as tired or exhausted as the medical professionals, our heroes on the front lines that we've talked with on a daily basis through the buildup and through the worst of times, and now through the retraction. And I'm continuing to listen to them and hear them say that this isn't over yet.
Those in favor of the bill say emergencies shouldn't last as long as this one has, which has now been in place just over 10 months. Governor Doug Burgum declared the state of emergency March 13th of last year because of the COVID-19 pandemic. It can only end if he rescinds it or if lawmakers pass a resolution to end it.
We can't just keep going in a state of emergency hoping for everybody to be healthy, because it's not going to happen. Nobody, I mean, take a poll of yourselves. How many of us are on medications? History of disease. There's no perfect world.
The resolution would have to pass in the House and the Senate to be enacted. There are so many bills being considered in these first few weeks here at the Capitol, and one of them aims to lessen the financial burden for families with children who have type 1 diabetes. Danelle Johnson has considered leaving the state because it doesn't have a law that caps co-pays for insulin, and the drug costs are just too high.
I'm North Dakota through and through, but keeping my daughter alive is more important.
Her 18-year-old daughter, Danica, has had type 1 diabetes for about 5.5 years. Managing it requires regular administration of insulin to stay alive.
When I was first diagnosed, I would give daily injections, so like 6 to 8 injections a day every time I ate or any time my blood sugar would get high. And now, about 4 years ago, I moved to an insulin pump. So it kind of drips in all day.
Out-of-pocket expenses for insulin have skyrocketed in recent years, prompting the creation of Senate Bill 2183, which would cap monthly co-payments to $25. Bill sponsor Senator Dick Dever says the advocates for affordable insulin have motivated him the most.
The bill did not come from a lobbyist, did not come from a national organization. It came from mothers who are struggling to help their children.
It's not the first time Danica has advocated for the issue. In 2019, she represented North Dakota in the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation Children's Congress, getting to meet with federal delegates to share her concerns.
It was really interesting to talk to them, and they saw a whole new side of diabetes in general. Just being able to put like diabetes to a face.
Casey Carlin from West Fargo can understand. Her 10-year-old daughter Regan has had type 1 diabetes since she was 3, and the monthly costs make it hard to manage.
And every time I went in to fill a prescription, it would be $20 more than it was the last time. And that doesn't seem like a big deal, but you're going in expecting to pay $150, and then it's $170, and that's $190. And it's kind of hard, it's hard to budget for that.
Carlin says with insurance, she meets the out-of-pocket limits for the year in January, paying upwards of $1,000 that month, then $200 to $300 every month after.
I have to plan for every January to get a great big hit to the pocketbook.
Carlin says the bill would give her family more financial stability and her daughter more freedom in the future.
She grows up and becomes an adult. She's going to need, her decisions, what kind of job she's going to get is going to be based on what kind of insurance she can get, and not necessarily, what kind of job she really wants.
There was not yet a vote on the bill, but Danelle and her daughter say they plan to continue providing testimony as the bill moves forward. Of course, Nicholas and Josh will continue to track it as the session rolls along.
Maddie Beer Temple, thank you, and we'll check back with you again soon.
Well, questions have come up over why Democratic Nonpartisan League Chairwoman Kylie Overson contributed $100 to the legal defense fund of the man who allegedly took an axe to Senator John Hoeven's Fargo office. Earlier this week, Thomas Starks of Lisbon was charged in federal court for the December incident. Overson spoke with KX News confirming her donation, saying it wasn't political, but out of an instinct to help someone with children. She went on to say that people are innocent until proven guilty, and she does not condone any sort of violence.
So I felt like our indigent defense system in North Dakota and in the country is underfunded. And I knew the kind of work that Mr. Starks does, and I knew that he had a wife and young kids, and this was right after the holidays, and that they wouldn't be able to afford a private attorney on their own. And so I felt like this was one small way I could help his family in what they were going through.
Overson's donation has taken heat from those at the North Dakota GOP who said her donation was, quote, inexcusable.
So to come on Inside North Dakota Politics, a conversation with Senator Yana Myrtle. We discuss her plan to amend the governor's power of state of emergency. Stick with us.
Enough. It's time to get a handle on the virus. The vaccine is how we take charge of our lives again. We're all tired of COVID. With the vaccine, we can do something about it. Let's do this.
Protect, monitor, and manage your grain bins with IntelliFarm's Bin Manager system. Bin Manager is the only grain bin automation system that dries, cools, and even rehydrates your grain. By keeping your grain in peak condition, you can preserve contents while maximizing your profits. You can also access your bin's data from any smartphone, tablet, or computer. More importantly, our system requires zero entry to ensure your safety. Gain peace of mind all year round with your grain storage from IntelliFarm's Bin Manager system.
Sometimes you need someone to help. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is here. Answered locally by FirstLink, connecting you with resources of help and hope. Dial 1-800-273-8255 to get connected.
Update any room of your home with Dutch Boy paint from Menards. Dutch Boy Forever is an interior paint and primer in one with Arm & Hammer odor-reducing technology. It offers advanced washability and stain resistance to block common household stains. Plus, we can tint your paint to match any color in your home. Pick up a gallon of Dutch Boy Forever paint and primer in one today for only $27.98 during Menards Home Improvement Sale.
Save big money at Menards.
About the COVID vaccine, as a healthcare worker, I go with what I know. I know what the virus can do, but I know what modern science can do too. I'm getting vaccinated.
Welcome back to Inside North Dakota Politics on KX.
Senator Jana Myrtle joins us, a Republican representing District 10 out of Edinburgh. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me.
So one of the bills that you co-sponsor is Senate Bill 2124, and it's about executive powers in emergencies, state of emergencies. Tell us how that's relevant for what's going on this week.
Well, I tell you what, we've gone through a tough year, 2020, no doubt about that. The governor's gone through a tough year. He's done a pretty good job. 2024 is really a people's bill, is what we call it. I'm the main sponsor on it, but as legislators, we've heard for enormous amount of emails and text about what has happened, different orders, different restrictions in the last 10 months. And so this came together through a task force. We looked at what the governor's authority is, which of course he has to have emergency authority, but we also looked at some of the gaps that were in the law. Actually, it goes way back to the 1980s when we had a measles crisis, and we kind of threw our authority away. And so what this is balancing the powers between the executive branch and the legislative branch. And let me say very clearly, this is not a reactive bill, a reaction to what has happened. It's a looking forward bill. So it's not really about this current COVID epidemic or this particular governor. It's about what is the correct balance so we can represent all the people in North Dakota.
So if the governor wants to take executive action in an emergency situation, how does he have to go forward with that under your bill? Absolutely the same way he does now. The gap that we're trying to fill is that there was no time limits on that emergency. So this bill says... So you're putting a time cap? We're putting a time cap pending that he would call in the legislators to carry this burden and to make the decisions with him. So the bill basically provides for the first 30 days of an emergency order from the governor. Then he's got to start thinking about, do I want it to last longer? He has 30 more days, but in those 30 more days, so up to 60, he has to call the legislative assembly in, virtually or in person, depending on the situation. And we can then concur. If he says, this is really bad, this flood is going to last 120 days, then the legislators concur with that, or we have the power to say, no, we're going to pass a resolution or a bill that says you have to stop after 60 days. So it really gives a 60-day emergency power, and after that we need to share the burden of a crisis for the people in North Dakota. Now what's going on in the legislature right now, people are calling for an end to the state of emergency. Mm-hmm. They worry that that will put financial funding in jeopardy. It does not. This bill does not do that. The governor stays completely fully with his emergency powers. He can call the National Guard out. Let's say it's a flood. Let's say it's a flood in 20 counties. It needs to go to 120 days. Now with technology that we have today, you can call us in the first 60 days and say, what do you think of this? We can virtually decide, actually later in the day, and it wouldn't cost the citizens of North Dakota a lot of money either to call us in that way, so that we can share that burden and we don't have to compare, let's say with the pandemic we've had now, a bar in little tiny, my district, District 10, shouldn't be treated as like a bar or a business in Fargo. It's just different. And so we need that input from all the legislators that are elected. And again, balance of power. Yeah, now let's talk about local control. The way it is right now, local municipalities don't have the control, but you want to establish that control for them, especially in cases such as mask mandates or mask mandates as an example.
The local commissioners, actually, city county commissioners, do have more control than they think, because the governor did a mask mandate, I think it was November, was the first statewide. Fargo, I think Cass County did it long before that because they had an uptick in infections in this virus. So that's one of the things we left alone because that's under what's called a home rule. We can't go and lord it over subdivisions. You know, we're very local. Government in North Dakota is bottoms up. You know, we don't sit here in Bismarck and go down. It's from the local townships and bottoms up. So I know people are frustrated right now. Hang on, let's get this bill through. Let's get it to the governor. I see it as a help for the governor. This is not a fight with the governor at all. I think we're in this fight together, and I think we need to join together when an emergency like this happens.
All right, any last message for North Dakotans?
Well, the Capitol is open, so people have said, we can't testify. Yes, you can. You can come down to the Capitol. Yes, you have to mask up in the Capitol still. You have to go through some security. Sadly, that's the world today. You can join us on Team at nd.gov. You can join any committee. We're live, everything. So it's probably more transparent, more open for constituents now than ever. And we love to see you come down into committee.
Senator Yana Myrdal, thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
And plenty more inside North Dakota politics coming up next.
These unprecedented times have increased the need to help tackle hunger in our community.
14 billion meals will be needed to feed those facing food insecurity in 2021.
Be a part of the solution and help us transform the big game into the largest celebration of giving and serving.
Go to the Tackle Hunger map and find your local food charity, conduct a food drive, or give online.
Join a winning team and help your neighbors in need at tacklehunger.org.
Sponsored by the Window and Door Store, Capital City Restaurant Supply, and Williston Auto.
Your news every hour in primetime is on News Nation on WGN America. News Nation reported on states around the country preparing for civil unrest.
I think when people can see that you're prepared, it acts as a deterrent.
And asked what's next following Donald Trump's historic second impeachment.
The pardon power is very broad.
News Nation covers your nation every night starting at 8, 7 Central on WGN America. Go to newsnationnow.com to find WGN America on your cable or satellite provider.
The time to buy new furniture is now during Keating Furniture World's January sale and clearance. And we kid you not, this isn't just any sale and clearance. It's the best furniture and mattress values, period. Give your home a new look in the new year with beautiful new living room, dining room, and bedroom furniture, floor coverings. Enjoy better sleep on a Sealy or Tempur-Pedic mattress. We're making the savings as exciting as possible. Plus, no interest for 5 years. Don't miss the January sale and clearance on now at Keating Furniture World.
Around here, things are different. We believe in working together when times get tough. Around here, neighbors help neighbors. We take pride in our way of life, and we step up when we're called. Around here, we help one another. Help someone in your community by supporting a local charity. This Giving Hearts Day.
Back to Inside North Dakota Politics on KX.
We're only a few weeks in, and already the year 2021 is full of historic moments.
I caught up with Jason Matthews, a political science professor at Bismarck State College, to discuss the remarkable times we're living in. Now, you're someone who thinks about politics and history quite a bit. When you think about the Capitol riots, January 6th, and the aftermath, how much of a real historical marker would it be decades from now, let's say?
Well, someday, probably in the not too distant future, somebody's going to write a book about the last 2 weeks, and they'll just simply call it three Wednesdays in January. You know, we often overuse the word unprecedented. We've certainly overused that for the last 4 years. But what we've been going through for the last, certainly the last 2 to 3 weeks, but really since the election, has been unprecedented in many ways in the history of the country.
So let's come back to North Dakota now for just a second. Another big story. We are just a few weeks into the legislative session. I'm sure it'll be over before we know it. But what do you think is the most interesting storyline you're following at the state capitol so far?
Well, we're at the point in the legislative session, and there seems to be a pattern here when the session begins. that there's always a lot of focus on bills that come up that are part and parcel of this larger cultural moment that we're in, or the culture wars. And so they get a lot of attention, and there's always a kerfuffle about those bills and what the impact would be. But ultimately, it always comes down to what legislative sessions always come down to, and that is the money. And so that's what I'm really looking at right now is where are they going to cut? What are the impacts going to be, where I work in higher education, but also more broadly. And this dynamic between the governor and the legislature, especially as it comes to executive powers and that relationship between Governor Burgum and his own party leadership.
And I want to go back, final question, to the election, whether it's been President Obama, President Trump, or President Biden now. Do we see Election Day too often as sort of like this glorious new day? Do we sort of get caught up in the moment and then are disappointed, or do you think those feelings are legitimate?
We get caught up in the moment because the presidency has taken on an outsized role in our lives. Presidents recently have almost become cults of personality, which is something that the framers never envisioned. And we look at it from the standpoint that the president's going to be able to come in, whether he's our guy or the other, or with the other side, is going to be able to change everything for good or for ill. When in actuality, the system that we have right now doesn't allow for that. And we are a country that has this Madisonian system of checks and balances, and a country also that I tell my students this, it requires advanced citizenship and advanced civics, and that's something that we need to work on in the country.
And next on Inside North Dakota Politics, we return to the state capitol. Maddie Biertemple will tell us about a bill aimed at helping mobile home residents across North Dakota.
Before you turn in for the night, watch Becky Farr and Chief Meteorologist Tom Schrader on KX News at 9 on the Dakota CW. Get us over the air, on satellite, or your cable TV provider. For all the day's news that matters most and a forecast to prepare you for what's ahead, wrap up your day with KX News at 9 on the Dakota CW.
How do you open tough jar lids? Do you try this one? Or this one? Or how about this one?
Honey?
This is the future. Shouldn't there be a robot for this by now? There is. Introducing RoboTwist, the robotic jar opener that easily twists off even the toughest lids. Just set it down, press the button, and watch it work. First, the RoboStrong vise locks down tight. Then the powerful twisting action unscrews the lid. RoboTwist is yours for the special introductory price of just $19.99. That's right, the robotic jar opener that easily twists off even the toughest lids. All for just $19.99. Whether the jar is big or small, RoboTwist can open them all. Supplies are limited, so don't delay. Here's how to get yours today.
Call 1-800-348-0353. That's 1-800-348-0353, or order online at buyrobotwist.com.
Some excellent news is coming from your Mandan Chevy dealer. Cooper Chevrolet is now Kramer Chevrolet. We're still the dealership you know and love, the home of warranty forever, great service, familiar faces, and our friendly, knowledgeable team. And as always, a fantastic lineup of new Chevy cars, trucks, crossovers, and SUVs, now with the Kramer advantage. Cooper is now Kramer. New name, same excellence. Find new roads at Kramer Chevrolet in Mandan. Stop by or visit us online at kramerchevrolet.com.
To Inside North Dakota Politics on KX.
State lawmakers have hundreds of bills to consider this session that could affect how we drive, how we're kept safe, and perhaps where we decide to live.
Happening now, political reporter Maddie Biertemple joins us from the state capitol to tell us more. Hi, Maddie.
Hi, Josh and Nicholas. Some renters in our region say that out-of-state landlords make it difficult to call North Dakota home. I caught up with some of those residents and a lawmaker hoping to help. If you drive through Colonial Estates Mobile Home Park in Bismarck, you'll notice empty lots. Resident Kathy Job says it's because people don't want to live under the current park ownership, or they've been evicted.
They have increased our lot rent. Even with the pandemic going on, they increased our lot rent in January.
Job says she's concerned over upticks in rent, extra fees for pets, and that an out-of-state company is managing mobile homes in North Dakota. Utah-based Haven Park Communities owns 5 Bismarck parks, including Colonial Estates and Holiday Park, which it took over in 2019. Since then, some residents, like Mindy Teskey, say they're not happy with the management.
When the company that came in and purchased, it all just went downhill from there. And right when COVID hit, I was scared. I was hit with a chance that I may not. I had to make a choice of paying my rent in April or getting medicine because I did not have enough to get both.
A bill in the legislature sponsored by Senator Dick Dever would seek to address those concerns by requiring on-site rental offices, advance notices of changes in rent or rules, and more.
My concern is that the residents of those homes across the state are citizens of our state, and the out-of-state investors are just investors.
Director of Government Affairs for the North Dakota Manufactured Homes Association, Kent French, says he spent the last year and a half hearing complaints from residents, and he wrote the bill to help their cause.
Most of the complaints that we've had were complaints because of new ownership from outside the state of North Dakota. And these people were coming in and purchasing communities without really knowing the individuals.
A Haven Park community spokesman said in his statement, quote, "By looking at the affordable housing issue, real improvements are possible. To do that also requires a candid examination of the fiscal realities and costs. We hope to be of assistance in the discussion and formation of policies and regulations that would preserve existing affordable housing and create more options for the affordable housing going forward." The bill has not yet been voted on and is still in committee. The Colonial Estates residents I spoke with said the new ownership has been an issue for many others in the community, too, since Haven Park took over in 2019. Now, the company spokesperson did say they were willing to work on legislation to maintain affordable housing in the area. Nicholas and Josh, back to you.
Maddie, thank you very much, and thank you for joining us once again for Inside North Dakota Politics.
Have a great week.